The jungle of Arvin 4 was unlike anything Ethan had ever seen. Massive trees with twisting roots towered above, their leaves glowing faintly in the dim sunlight that reached through the thick canopy. The air was warm, damp, and filled with the constant hum of strange creatures. Every breath tasted of moss, pollen, and something sharp that hinted at danger. The research team moved in a single line along a narrow path. Their boots sank into the soft ground, and vines brushed against their arms as they passed. There were 5 humans and 4 aliens on the mission, all sent to collect samples of rare plants that only grew in this region. Their guide, a tall alien named Drask, led the way with a spear in hand. He was from a local tribe and knew the jungle better than anyone else. Just behind him walked Lyra, an alien woman whose skin had a soft silver tone and eyes like deep violet glass. She was a biologist from another world, calm and steady no matter the situation. She carried her scanner in one hand and a small satchel of tools at her side. Ethan followed close behind her, his eyes scanning the undergrowth. He wasn't a scientist. He was security for the team, a role he took seriously. Drask had warned them before they entered the jungle. "There is one danger above all others," he had said, his voice low and serious. "The thrice viper. Its bite kills in minutes. If you see it, do not get close. It is faster than you think." Most of the scientists had nodded and then gone back to talking about the plants they hoped to find. Ethan had listened more carefully. He'd dealt with dangerous animals before, though never on a planet like this. If the guide feared this snake, then it was no small threat. Hours passed as they moved deeper into the wild. The heat pressed on them like a heavy blanket. Sweat rolled down Ethan's neck, but he kept his focus. From time to time, he caught glimpses of movement in the shadows. Small lizards darting across logs, insects with shimmering wings, and once, something larger that vanished before he could get a good look. The group stopped by a small stream to refill their water packs. The water was clear, moving gently over smooth stones. Strange plants with red petals grew along the banks, and Lyra knelt to examine them with interest. Ethan crouched beside her, watching the trees on the far side of the stream. "You're quiet today," Lyra said without looking up. "Just keeping my eyes open," Ethan replied. "Places like this, you never know what's watching." She gave a small smile, scanning one of the plants. "You humans are always so cautious. It's almost charming." Before Ethan could answer, Drask signaled for them to move again. They followed the stream until it narrowed and crossed over a moss-covered log. Drask went first, stepping lightly despite his size. Lyra went next, her scanner still in hand. Ethan stayed close, ready to catch her if she slipped. That was when it happened. There was a sharp hiss from the undergrowth to the right of the log, followed by a blur of motion. A long, dark shape struck out faster than a blink. 2 curved fangs sank deep into Lyra's leg just above her boot. She gasped, dropping her scanner into the water. "Thrice viper!" Drask shouted. The snake withdrew, its scales shifting color, to match the moss before it slid back into the plants. Ethan caught only a brief look at it. A thick, coiled body and eyes that glowed faintly gold. Lyra staggered, her face already losing color. She clutched at her leg, and Ethan saw 2 small punctures surrounded by skin that was quickly turning dark. The others froze in shock. One of the alien researchers muttered, "It's over. There's no cure out here." Another backed away, fear written plainly on their face. "Help me get her across," Ethan barked, snapping them out of it. Drask hesitated. "Our medkits are at the base camp. It's hours away. She won't make it." Ethan's mind raced. Hours away meant certain death, but he remembered something from survival training back on Earth. How in some cases venom could be slowed if it was drawn out quickly before it spread. It was risky, but doing nothing wasn't an option. He dropped to his knees beside Lyra. "Hold still," he said firmly. She looked at him, confused and weak. "What are you doing?" trying to save you. He took out his field knife and made a quick, shallow cut near the bite. Then he pressed his mouth to the wound and drew the venom out, spitting it into the stream. Some of the team looked away in disbelief. One alien whispered, "That's madness! Human saliva could harm her more." Ethan ignored them. Every second counted. He repeated the process, feeling the bitterness of the venom on his tongue before spitting again. Lyra's breathing was fast and shallow, but she kept her eyes on him, as if clinging to the thought that he might somehow pull her back from the edge. Finally, when he'd done all he could, Ethan tied a strip of cloth above the wound to slow the spread. He looked up at Drask. "We move now. She's not dying here." Drask nodded, his earlier hesitation gone. "Then we run." Ethan lifted Lyra into his arms, her weight light but unsteady in his grasp. The jungle seemed to close in around them as they turned back toward the path. Somewhere behind them, a faint hiss echoed in the distance, reminding them the predator was still out there, watching. They had a long and dangerous journey ahead, but Ethan wasn't about to let go. Ethan's boots sank deep into the wet ground as he ran, carrying Lyra in his arms. The heat and heavy air wrapped around him like a thick blanket, but he didn't slow down. Each step jarred his muscles, but he kept his grip firm. She felt too light in his arms, her head resting against his chest, her breaths shallow and uneven. Drask moved ahead, cutting through vines with his spear to clear the path. The rest of the team followed, their eyes darting to the shadows. It wasn't just the viper they had to worry about now. Other predators in the jungle could smell blood. Behind them, thunder rolled in the distance. The sky was darkening fast, and the air felt charged. The storm would hit soon, and once it did, the paths would turn to mud and the streams would swell, making travel even harder. "Keep going," Ethan urged. "We can make it before the rain hits." Drask glanced back. "If the jungle allows it." They reached a narrow section of the trail where twisted roots rose from the ground like barriers. Ethan stepped over them carefully, not wanting to jostle Lyra too much. Her eyes flickered open for a moment. "You should put me down," she whispered weakly. "I'm slowing you." "Not happening," Ethan said firmly. "You're not slowing me. You're the reason I'm running." Her lips moved as if she wanted to say something else, but no words came. Her head rested back against his chest, and he quickened his pace. As they moved, the jungle seemed to grow louder. Bird-like creatures with metallic feathers shrieked from high branches. Small lizards scurried across the path. Once, Ethan caught a flash of something large moving between the trees, but it didn't come closer. They came to a small clearing, and Drask stopped suddenly, holding up a hand. Ethan halted, behind him, breathing hard. "What is it?" Ethan asked. Drask pointed to the ground ahead. In the soft earth, there were fresh tracks, wide, three-toed prints with deep claw marks. "Jungle stalker," Drask said in a low voice. "It hunts anything weaker than itself." "Great," Ethan muttered. "Just what we need." They moved, around the clearing's edge, trying to stay quiet. But a sudden snap of a branch echoed through the trees, followed by a low growl. A pair of glowing eyes appeared in the shadows. The creature stepped into view, taller than a man, with dark scales and a long tail that swayed slowly. "Don't run," Drask whispered. "It will chase." Ethan tightened his hold on Lyra and kept moving forward, never turning his back to the creature. His heart pounded, but he kept his breathing steady. The jungle stalker followed for several tense minutes, always staying just at the edge of the trees. Finally, it stopped, watching them until they disappeared from its sight. The path grew narrower, and the first drops of rain began to fall. The smell of wet earth filled the air. Ethan's arms ached from carrying Lyra, but he didn't complain. Every few minutes, he looked down to make sure she was still breathing. "How far?" Ethan asked Drask. Another hour if we don't stop, Drask replied. That answer made Ethan push harder, but the rain quickly turned into a downpour, soaking everyone in seconds. The ground became slick and water ran down the path in small streams. Thunder crashed overhead, and flashes of lightning lit the trees in brief, blinding bursts. The team pressed on, their clothes clinging to their skin. The rain made it harder to hear anything moving nearby, which worried Ethan. Predators could be close, and they wouldn't know until it was too late. At one point, the path crossed a narrow wooden bridge over a deep ravine. The bridge swayed under their weight and water rushed below. Ethan stepped carefully, keeping Lyra close, afraid the old planks might give way. But they made it across, and the camp was finally within reach. As they neared the base, the jungle began to thin. The bright lights of the camp's perimeter fence shone through the trees like beacons. Relief washed over Ethan, but he didn't let himself slow down. They still had to get Lyra inside and to the medics. When they reached the gate, 2 human guards rushed forward. "What happened?" one asked. "Viper bite," Ethan said quickly. "Get a medic now." They sprinted through the camp to the medical tent. The medic, a middle-aged woman with sharp eyes, immediately took charge. "Lay her here," she ordered. Ethan set Lyra down gently on the examination bed. Her skin had lost much of its silver tone, now pale and cold to the touch. The medic quickly scanned the wound, frowning. "You bought her time, but the venom is still in her system. We need to work fast." As the medic prepared the antidote, she glanced at Ethan. "Without your action out there, she wouldn't have made it this far. Not many would risk doing what you did." Ethan didn't answer. He just stepped back, letting the medics work. Drask stood beside him, watching in silence. Outside, the storm raged on, hammering the camp with rain. The sound of it filled the tent, but Ethan's focus was entirely on the still figure on the bed. Her chest rose and fell, and that was enough for now. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours as the medics injected the antidote and used alien technology to filter her blood. Slowly, her breathing steadied, and a faint bit of color returned to her cheeks. The medic finally looked up. "She's not out of danger yet, but she's past the worst of it. Now she just needs rest." Ethan let out a long breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. "You saved her?" Drask said quietly. "Humans, you never stop surprising." "Me?" Ethan gave a small shrug. "It's not about being human. It's about not leaving someone behind." He stayed by her side as the rain poured outside, refusing to move until he was sure she would wake again. The storm lasted through the night, pounding the camp with heavy rain and loud thunder that made the walls of the medical tent tremble. Ethan stayed by Lyra's bed, sitting in a metal chair with his elbows resting on his knees. He hadn't slept. Every time she shifted or made a small sound, his eyes went to her face, searching for signs of pain or distress. The medics had checked on her several times, scanning her vitals and adjusting the fluid lines connected to her arm. The venom was still working its way out of her system, but her breathing was stronger now. The pale color of her skin was slowly fading, replaced by the soft silver tone that was normal for her. By morning, the storm had passed, leaving the jungle dripping and quiet. Sunlight streamed through gaps in the tent flaps. Ethan finally leaned back in the chair, his body aching from hours of sitting still. Lyra stirred, her fingers twitching slightly. Ethan sat forward instantly, her violet eyes opened slowly, unfocused at first, then settling on him. "You're still here," she said in a weak voice. "Where else would I be?" Ethan replied with a faint smile. "You gave us quite a scare." She looked around the tent, then down at the bandages on her leg. "I remember the Viper, and you." She paused, her gaze locking on him. "You did something dangerous." "Had to," he said simply. There wasn't time to think about it. She was quiet for a moment, her expression unreadable. Then she said softly, "Thank you, Ethan." You saved my life." Before he could respond, Drask entered the tent, his tall frame filling the doorway. "The council wants to hear what happened," he said. "They've already heard rumors about your actions." "Rumors?" Ethan asked. "Word spreads fast," Drask said. "Especially when it challenges what people believe about humans." Ethan frowned. "And what do they believe?" "That you act without thought. That you throw yourselves into danger for no reason," Drask replied. "But now, they might see there's more to it." The medic came over and checked Lyra again. "She needs rest," the woman said. "No long talks, no stress. Her body is still recovering from the venom." Drask nodded and stepped back. "Very well. But when you're ready, Lyra, your voice will matter in telling this story. After..." He left. Lyra turned her head toward Ethan. "You should rest too." "You look worse than I feel." He shook his head. "I'll rest when you're walking again." Over the next 2 days, Lyra's strength slowly returned. She was able to sit up without feeling dizzy, and the swelling in her leg went down. The camp's alien healers brought her special herbal compresses from the jungle, and she even managed a small laugh when Ethan joked about how terrible they smelled. But news of the snakebite incident didn't stay in the camp. Messengers came from nearby outposts, curious to see the human who had risked himself to save an alien in such a way. Some came out of respect, others out of disbelief, asking if the story was really true. Ethan kept his answers short, not enjoying the attention. On the 3rd morning, the camp leader called for a meeting in the main hall. The hall was a large, open structure built from thick beams and covered with wide leaves woven into a roof. Lanterns hung from ropes, swaying gently in the breeze. When Ethan and Lyra entered, the room fell silent. Dozens of eyes turned toward them, humans, aliens from several worlds, and members of the jungle tribes. At the front, the camp leader stood beside Drask, both waiting for them. Drask spoke first. "We are gathered to hear the account of what happened in the jungle 3 days ago. There are many versions of the story, but we will hear it from those who were there." Lyra took a step forward, still leaning slightly on a cane. Her voice was clear and steady. She described the events from the start of the mission, the crossing of the stream, the sudden strike of the thrice viper, and the shock of the team. She told them about how Ethan acted without hesitation, how he used what knowledge he had to slow the venom. When she finished, the leader of the camp spoke. "Many of us know the viper's venom leaves no survivors when far from the antidote. The act you describe is not only rare, it goes against the instincts of most. You risked yourself for another, knowing there was little chance of success." Ethan shifted uncomfortably under the attention. "It wasn't about chances. It was about not letting her die in front of me." There was a murmur in the hall. Some of the aliens looked at him with surprise, others with newfound respect. One of the tribal elders stepped forward. "In our culture, we call such an act a life binding. When you take the venom from another, you carry part of their life. With you, such bonds are not broken." Lyra glanced at Ethan, her expression thoughtful. The meeting ended with the leader declaring that the incident would be recorded in the camp's official logs. As they left the hall, several people stopped to offer their thanks or simply to nod in respect. Later, as they walked back toward the medical tent, Lyra spoke quietly. "Do you know what that elder meant? About carrying part of my life?" "Not really," Ethan admitted. "But if it means I'm stuck making sure you don't get bitten again, I can live with that." She smiled faintly. "Then I guess I'll have to keep you around." The jungle beyond the camp was still full of dangers, but something had changed between them. It wasn't just survival anymore, it was trust, solid and unshakable, built in the moments when life hung by a thread, and Ethan knew this was only the beginning. The days after the council meeting passed quietly, but the jungle beyond the camp walls never truly rested. The air was still thick with the smell of damp earth from the storm, and every night strange calls echoed through the darkness. Lyra was recovering well. She could walk short distances without the cane now, though Ethan stayed close whenever she moved. He didn't say it out loud, but he still worried about her strength. She caught him watching her more than once, and though she teased him about it, she didn't tell him to stop. On the morning of the fourth day, Drask came to their tent. "The council wants another plant sample from the red petal region," he said. "The same area where we were attacked." Ethan narrowed his eyes. "You're telling me we're going back there?" "We know the risks now," Drask replied. "And the storm has brought new growth. It's the best time to collect samples. Besides," he glanced at Lyra, "you are both familiar with the dangers." Lyra looked at Ethan, reading his thoughts before he spoke. "We can handle it," she said firmly. "But we go prepared this time." Within hours, they were back in the jungle. The air felt heavier than before, the sounds of distant animal calls sharper. This time, Ethan carried a longer blade and a small medkit strapped to his side. Lyra had her scanner and a newly issued protective leg guard designed to resist fang strikes. Drask led the way again, following narrow animal tracks through the undergrowth. The rest of the team had changed too, more alert, weapons ready, eyes scanning the shadows. They reached the stream without trouble, but as they began crossing, Ethan noticed something strange. The moss on the fallen log was disturbed, as if something heavy had slid across it recently. He crouched and touched it. The surface was damp and slightly sticky. "Drask," Ethan called quietly. "We're not alone." The guide's eyes narrowed. "I know. I've felt it since we entered the trees. The viper may have a nest nearby." Lyra looked at the ground near the bank. "Tracks," she said softly. "Fresh." Before they could decide on their next move, a sharp hiss came from behind them, another from the left. Ethan turned slowly, scanning the trees. Two shapes moved in the shadows, long, dark, and coiling. "There's more than one," he muttered. The vipers didn't strike immediately. They circled, their scales blending with the foliage, their golden eyes locked on the group, watching for weakness. "Stay close," Drask warned, raising his spear. "They're testing us." One of the vipers struck suddenly, aiming for a researcher, at the back of the line. Ethan lunged, grabbing the man's arm and pulling him out of the way just in time. The snake's fangs hit the ground where the man had been standing, leaving deep marks in the soil. The team reacted instantly. Drask drove his spear into the ground near the viper's head, forcing it to retreat. Another team member fired a stun, pulse from a handheld weapon sending the second viper sliding back into the undergrowth. But the danger wasn't over. The hissing grew louder, echoing from multiple directions. Ethan realized with a chill that they had stumbled into a hunting ground. "We need to move! Now!" he barked. The group pushed forward, abandoning the original sample site. Ethan stayed near the rear, keeping an eye on the shifting shadows. Twice more, vipers darted toward them, but the team's quick response kept them at bay. Finally, after nearly an hour of tense movement, they reached a rocky ridge. The vipers didn't follow beyond this point, retreating back into the trees. The team collapsed in the relative safety of the ridge, breathing hard. Lyra sat on a smooth stone, scanning her leg guard. "One of them hit me," she said, showing the faint dent where a fang had struck. "If not for this, I'd be back in the med tent." Ethan looked at her seriously. "We're not coming back here again without heavy backup. This place isn't just dangerous, it's watching us." Drask nodded. "Vipers are intelligent hunters. Once they mark prey, they remember." The thought didn't sit well with Ethan. He kept scanning the jungle below as the team rested, half expecting to see golden eyes staring back. On the way back to camp, the air felt different, quieter, but not in a good way. The usual bird calls were gone, replaced by the soft rustle of leaves and the occasional distant thump of something large moving through the brush. When they reached the gates, the guards looked uneasy. "Scouts reported movement near the perimeter," one of them said. Large serpents, bigger than anything we've seen before. Lyra and Ethan exchanged a glance. They didn't need to say it out loud. They both knew the vipers hadn't just let them go. That night, the camp was on high alert. Extra lights were placed along the walls and guards patrolled in pairs. Ethan stayed awake, sitting outside his tent with a rifle across his lap. The jungle beyond the fence was dark, but every now and then he thought he saw a flicker of gold between the trees. Lyra joined him quietly, sitting beside him in the cool night air. "You think they're out there, don't you?" she asked. "I know they are," he replied, "and they're waiting." The two of them sat in silence for a while, listening to the night. The jungle felt alive with a hidden tension, as if something was building, something that wouldn't stay hidden for long. And deep in the darkness, beyond the reach of the lights, the Thrace vipers coiled silently, their golden eyes unblinking. The jungle was silent, too silent. Not a single bird call or insect hum broke the night air. The camp's lights cast long beams into the trees, but beyond that, darkness swallowed everything. Ethan sat outside the tent with his rifle ready, scanning the shadows. He'd felt it for hours. That uneasy heaviness, the kind that warned a hunter was near. Lyra sat beside him, her eyes sharp despite still recovering. "It's coming tonight, isn't it?" she asked. "Yeah," Ethan said quietly. "They didn't follow us this far just to give up." The guards along the wall shifted nervously, their weapons aimed outward. Drask stood at the main gate, speaking in low tones with the camp leader. Everyone could feel it, the tension before a storm, only this one wouldn't be made of rain. Then it came. A deep hiss rolled through the jungle, low and rumbling like a warning drum. It was answered by another, closer this time. Golden eyes appeared between the trees, one pair, then three, then more than Ethan could count. The Thrace vipers were here. "Positions!" the camp leader shouted. The first viper struck without hesitation, launching itself from the darkness toward the outer wall. Its massive body coiled around the barrier, and with terrifying strength, it began pulling itself up. Gunfire erupted, flashes of light cutting through the night as the guards fired. "They're bigger than before," Lyra said, gripping her weapon. "Adults," Ethan replied grimly. "We saw the smaller ones earlier. These are the real hunters." Another viper crashed into the far side of the camp, its tail smashing a supply crate. The scent of fear filled the air as the creatures pressed their attack. Their scales shifted in color, blending into the surroundings even in the glow of the floodlights, making them hard to target. Ethan sprinted toward the western wall where one had nearly breached. "Cover me!" he shouted to the guards. Climbing. "The platform!" He fired point blank into the serpent's head. It recoiled, hissing in rage before sliding back into the dark, but there was no time to rest. 3 more vipers surged forward, one smashing through a section of the wall near the gate. Drask met it head-on, his spear striking at its mouth to keep it from lunging at the guards. "We can't hold like this," a guard yelled. Lyra appeared at Ethan's side, carrying a portable sonic emitter. "Help me set this up," she shouted, over the noise. "Will it work on them?" Ethan asked. "It should. It mimics the distress calls of their kind. It might drive them off." Together, they dragged the device toward the breach. The vipers sensed something and turned their golden eyes toward them. One lunged, its open mouth revealing long, glistening fangs. Ethan fired, hitting it in the jaw, buying just enough time for Lyra to activate the emitter. A piercing, vibrating sound filled the air. The vipers froze, their bodies twitching as if in confusion. Then, one by one, they began to retreat, sliding back toward the tree line. But not all of them left. The largest of the vipers, a massive serpent with scars across its head, did not move. Instead, it coiled tighter, glaring at Ethan and Lyra. Its hiss was deeper, angrier, carrying a promise of vengeance. "It's not afraid," Ethan said, keeping his weapon aimed. "That one's the alpha," Lyra replied. It's controlling the hunt. The Alpha struck, moving faster than seemed possible for its size. Ethan dove to the side, pulling Lyra down with him as its fangs pierced the ground where they had been standing. The sonic emitter cracked under the force, its sound sputtering out. "It's broken," Lyra said. Drask charged forward, driving his spear into the Alpha's side. It roared and thrashed, its massive tail sweeping across the ground, knocking 2 guards off their feet. Ethan scrambled up, firing shot after shot into its eyes. One bullet hit its mark, and the creature recoiled with a deafening hiss. Wounded and enraged, the Alpha finally pulled back, its body disappearing into the jungle shadows. The other Vipers, sensing their leader's retreat, slipped away with it. The camp fell into silence, except for the heavy breathing of the survivors. Weapons lowered slowly, and the air felt less suffocating. "They'll be back," Drask said grimly, wiping blood from his spear. "But now they know we can hurt them." Ethan looked at Lyra, who was catching her breath beside him. "Next time, we'll be ready before they get here," the camp leader approached. "You two bought us the time we needed. Without that device, without the shots you took, we wouldn't be standing." Lyra glanced toward the dark tree line. "This isn't over. The Alpha won't let go of this grudge. It marked us in the jungle. It'll keep hunting." Ethan nodded. "Then we hunt it first." The camp began repairs immediately, but the night had left its mark. Everyone knew the Vipers were no longer just a danger to those who entered the jungle. They were a threat that could strike at any time. And somewhere out there, in the deep-shadowed heart of Arvin 4, the Alpha waited, coiled and patient. The camp was on edge for days after the attack. Guards doubled their patrols, floodlights stayed on all night, and no one went into the jungle without heavy escort. But no matter how secure the camp looked, Ethan knew the Alpha Viper was still out there. It wasn't gone. It was waiting. Lyra felt it too. Every time she looked toward the tree line, her expression tightened. "It's watching us," she said one evening as they stood near the fence. "Yeah," Ethan replied, "and sooner or later, it's going to make its move again. We can't just sit here hoping it doesn't." Drask agreed. Vipers are patient, but they are also prideful. When challenged, the Alpha will not rest until it ends the threat. We must go to it before it comes for us again. Plans were made that night. Drask would lead them into the deep hunting grounds of the Vipers, a place even the jungle tribes avoided. Ethan, Lyra, and 2 other skilled hunters would go with him. Their goal was simple: find the Alpha and make sure it never returned. Before dawn, the small team set out. The jungle was cold in the early morning mist, the air heavy with the scent of wet leaves and earth. They moved silently, each step measured, scanning the shadows for signs of movement. Hours passed before Drask stopped and knelt by a patch of churned earth. "Fresh tracks," he said. "Very large. It is close." They followed the trail to a rocky gorge covered in thick vines. The sound of running water echoed from somewhere below. Drask raised his hand, signaling them to stop. In the clearing, ahead, the Alpha Viper lay coiled on a wide stone, its scarred head raised as if it had been expecting them. Its golden eyes locked onto Ethan immediately. A low, deep hiss rolled through the gorge, making the air vibrate. "Spread out," Ethan said quietly. The hunters moved to the sides, weapons ready. Lyra stayed close to Ethan, her scanner in hand. "Its muscle activity is high. It's ready to strike at any moment," she whispered. The Alpha didn't wait long. With a burst of speed, it lunged straight at Ethan. He rolled to the side, firing as he moved. Bullets struck its thick scales, some finding softer spots near its mouth and neck. The Viper twisted mid-air, its massive tail sweeping toward Lyra. She dove aside just in time, the impact cracking the ground where she'd been. Drask charged in with his spear, aiming for the creature's eye. The Alpha reared back, avoiding the blow, and lashed out with its tail, knocking Drask to the ground. Ethan fired again, aiming for the head. This time, a shot pierced just above the creature's jaw, making it hiss in pain. It coiled tightly, then launched itself upward, wrapping around a thick tree branch before dropping down toward the team. "Keep moving!" Ethan shouted. The hunters scattered, each trying to draw its attention. Lyra activated a small device from her belt, a high-pitched frequency emitter designed to disorient predators. The alpha flinched at the sound, but didn't retreat. Instead, it focused entirely on her. "Lyra, move!" Ethan yelled. She backed away, firing short bursts from her weapon. The alpha struck at her, its fangs coming within inches of her arm before Ethan rammed into its side, shoving it off course. It crashed into a tree, snapping it in half. Drask was back on his feet now, spear in hand. "We end this now!" he shouted, charging forward. The alpha struck again, but this time Ethan and Drask moved together. Ethan distracted it with gunfire to the eyes, while Drask drove his spear deep into its neck. The creature thrashed violently, its tail smashing, the ground and sending dirt and leaves flying. Lyra saw an opening and fired her weapon directly into the wound Drask had made. The blast hit deep, and the alpha let out a final ear-splitting hiss before collapsing. Its massive body twitched, then went still. Silence fell over the gorge. The team stood there for a moment, breathing hard, staring at the lifeless serpent. "It's over," Lyra said quietly. Ethan lowered his rifle. "Yeah, it's over." Drask stepped forward, placing a hand on the creature's scarred head. "The jungle will be safer now. This one will not stalk your camp again." The journey back to camp felt lighter, the constant tension in the air finally broken. When they returned, the camp erupted in relief. The story spread quickly, not just of the alpha's death, but of how humans and aliens had fought side by side to bring it down. That night, the camp held a quiet celebration. Food was shared, fires burned bright, and for the first time in weeks, people laughed without glancing nervously at the tree line. Later, Ethan and Lyra stood near the fence, looking out into the dark jungle. "You saved me twice," Lyra said softly. "First in the jungle, then again today." "You saved me too," Ethan replied. "We got through it together." She smiled faintly. "Maybe this place isn't so deadly after all, if we face it the right way." Ethan looked out into the night, knowing there would always be dangers out there. But now, they had faced one of the worst, and won. And somewhere deep in the jungle, life continued as always. But the golden eyes that once watched them with hunger were gone, replaced by the quiet respect of a world that had tested them and found them worthy.